Morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our second stakeholder meeting on enhancing accessibility and inclusion. So just to give a background, we already had a stakeholder meeting under the same initiative, and there the training modules were focused more on students, caregivers, special educators. So the focus was more on sensitization and awareness. Here we're trying to scale up, we're trying to move into the technicalities of how to really conduct accessibility audits, how to look into the technical guidelines of working on inclusion and accessibility. So for that, I will first call upon Ms. Parul Agarwal, who's our country program manager, who will set the stage of what the project is really about and what are we aiming to do in the initiative. And for those who are speaking, I request just take the mic so that our participants online can also hear for whatever the inputs are.
Okay, yeah. All right. Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to all of you. And a special thanks to Professor Banerjee and Professor Chattopadhyay and our the keynote speaker, Mr. Sunil Kumar Srivastava. I know it's and I just want to thank everyone in advance for making the time for this stakeholder consultation workshop. Do we have the slide? Okay, sure. So to give you a quick snapshot, this is a project called the Mainstreaming Leaving No One Behind, specifically in SDGs 11 and 6, which is a regional program that covers 4 countries in South Asia and has 3 broad areas that we are focusing on. The objective of the program is to look at the national governance frameworks and also partner with the urban local bodies to see how we can make an informed refinement to disability inclusion in the way the urban policies, regulations, planning, designs really transform our built environment, and also to see how well we can make those vertical linkages at the different levels of governance more have them better aligned. And with that, so broadly, what we have done thus far at the regional level is we are creating an online a platform which would allow for cross-country collaborations and knowledge exchange amongst the 4 countries. And I should mention these are Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and India. And we work very closely with UNESCO, which also has a portfolio of countries from the Asia Pacific. So beyond these 4 countries which this project is engaged in, we are bringing in learnings from other countries as well. And with our collaboration with partners in India and regionally, we have developed learning modules on how which cover different dimensions of disability inclusion, and also what is really needed to engage a variety of stakeholders. So these learning modules cover understanding disability, why it is important, what are the current regional and global frameworks and agreements for disability inclusion that give that legal mandate, how this can be addressed in SDG 6 and 11. Again, not with the idea to have a separate guideline for disability inclusion, but we want to move towards a pathway where every guideline regulation we are putting in, whether be it on TOD, on access to wash, has that integrated, has the element of disability inclusion already integrated in it. And understanding what does inclusive public policy mean, and then ideas on mainstreaming the principles of leaving no one behind. At the national level in India, we have had I mean, I should I really commend the team and all our partners who have made a lot of these achievements possible, starting with the National Conclave on Gender and Disability Inclusion, which was done in partnership with a number of UN agencies, the National Institute of Urban Affairs and Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, World Economic Forum, and quite a few that came together. And a lot of URC around the table were also part of that. that initial dialogue. From that, leading to the capacity building programs, which were organized at the conclave and four other cities, and developing guidance note and digital toolkits on inclusion, accessible, safe, and resilient urban development. And these are also important toolkits that the urban practitioners, engineers can use on informing the work that they do in their everyday life. We also launched a Smart Solutions Challenge, an Inclusive Cities Award, which was a call for proposal or call for entries from entrepreneurs, from innovators at the national level, and quite a lot of interesting technologies, ideas emerged. And in fact, the honorable minister himself was one of the awarded these prizes. We have with IIT Roorkee and IIT Kharagpur developed thematic modules which cover disability inclusion in governance in ICT and public spaces, and also some policy briefs that are under preparation on disability and gender inclusion in the urban space. At the local level, which covers the work that we are doing with cities. Like my colleague Adishri mentioned, we have focused um, on the intersection of disability inclusion in schools. And there, again, with our partner IIT Kharagpur, we have done a pilot test, training modules in two schools in Delhi to see how we can engage with students, with parents, the caregivers, the school management that is responsible for day-to-day maintenance of the school compound on making it more inclusive and better. And finally, we have completed these training programs and the learnings. We'll be happy to share the proceedings here with you. More than 400 students participated in these training programs, and from the outcome of this is a self-paced training modules that can be made available to a wide array of schools and stakeholders. And so happy to continue this discussion and now move into the framework of the more technical aspects of this project. Um, so yeah, I'm really looking forward to some engaging discussions like we had last time as well.
Thank you so much, Parul. So actually, if so, what with the pilot training programs, we also prepared like a brief video to show the proceedings. So I'll just share the video once as well. Um,
75% of children with disabilities under the age of 5 have never been to a school. Moreover, 28% of children with disabilities between the ages of 6 and 13 are out of school. The Right to Education Act 2009 and the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016 have helped create a comprehensive legal framework for inclusive education. However, gaps still persist in the actionable guidelines applicable to all educational institutions and appropriate ways to implement them. Even the limited norms for accessible physical infrastructure remain unimplemented in most states. For instance, over 76% of the schools in the country still don't have ramps, and over 80% of the schools don't have accessible toilets for students. So how can we make these rights a reality for all children?
It is important that both physical and social barriers to inclusion are addressed in schools. Teachers and students must be sensitized to a holistic understanding of disability and the importance of universal accessibility. I think it is key to enabling a truly inclusive environment.
Under the global UN initiative, Mainstreaming Leave No One Behind, UN Habitat India, along with the Department of Social Welfare Government of Delhi and IIT Kharagpur, are implementing a city-level capacity building program called Enhancing Accessibility and Inclusion in Schools.
The program aims to sensitize children, caregivers, special educators, and officials that are part of the school ecosystem on accessible, safe, and inclusive schools for all, especially for children with disabilities. These sensitized stakeholders can further support the dissemination of knowledge and awareness at the ground level.
The program's pilot was organized in Delhi in December 2022, with the first phase of training being conducted in two government schools: the Government Boys Senior Secondary School in Defence Colony and the Shahid Hemu Kalani Sarvodaya Bal Vidyalay in Lajpat Nagar. Specifically designed, brief and engaging sessions were organized to generate awareness, sensitize school children, and train school teachers on accessibility and disability inclusion in schools.
The participants were introduced to several concepts, such as barriers experienced in different zones of a school and how to conduct accessibility audits for physical, social, and digital inclusion. We also informed them about many universal design practices and guidelines for making the school buildings, campuses, and infrastructure barrier-free and accessible for all.
Simulation exercises were also conducted with volunteers, including children and staff, for three types of disabilities: disability in movement non-ambulant, disability in movement semi-ambulant, and disability in seeing. The participants were then invited to share their experiences and elaborate on the barriers they faced during the course of the simulation. All modules delivered in the program are in line with specific targets of SDG 4, SDG 6, and SDG 11. They also align with national level inclusion campaigns such as the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan and the Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan. Approximately 200 students and 200 staff and special educators from both schools, including a few students with disabilities in each school, participated in the training programs.
The sessions were clear, interactive, and hands-on, and provided us knowledge and the tools to create more inclusive space for our students. सच में इस ट्रेनिंग के माध्यम से हमें बहुत सी चीज़ें सीखने को मिली और ये ट्रेनिंग बहुत ही यूजफुल और बेनिफिशियल रही.
Going forward, the program modules will be disseminated from the pilot schools to many other schools falling under the jurisdiction of the Government of Delhi. The training content and supporting material developed for the live training sessions will further be designed as a self-paced online course. However, this is just the first step. At UN Habitat, we are committed to enabling inclusive educational systems so that each individual has equal opportunity to realize their full potential. Join us in our endeavor to create inclusive, accessible, and safe schools that leave no one behind.
So that concludes the video. And we basically were planning to do also a second set of training programs after the training review that we conduct here. So the objective of today's meeting is to conduct a peer review of the second set of training modules that we would discuss. And moving into, like, that was the context setting, but moving into a very important part is to involve the stakeholders who would actually participate in the rolling out of the trainings. So we have Shri Sunil Kumar Srivastava, who is here as the Chief Engineer of Public Works Department of the Government of Delhi. And I please invite him to share his remarks.
Thank you. I would like to express my deep gratitude to the UN Habitat and its partner IIT Kharagpur for inviting me on this gathering to deliver the keynote address on the topic of enhancing accessibility and inclusion in schools. To put things into perspective, I'd like to say that as per the last census, the number of disabled children were about 20 lakhs, and which are equally distributed among urban and rural part of the country. majority of the people, a little less than 50% are having visually impairment. Disability of speech comes next, and mental and hearing is the lower part of it. So disability to the extent for education is that 25% are able to study. The people who have studied, 25% are only able to study till primary level, 11% till middle level, and 9% are only able to go beyond the 9 years of education. So this is the position, and the situation is quite grim. Lot of effort is being made continuously, and UN Habitat has also been instrumental in doing the right things, because education is a very important human development and fundamental right of every child, where accessibility in school is one of the important parameters for any of the children to go for schools. If that is not provided, the basic enabling environment is missing, which will prevent the child from going to these schools even if he wish to do. So the purpose is to create an environment where if the child wants, the enabling environment is not a stumbling block for him to gain education. Although serious efforts were made, especially by UN over the long period of time, since 1946, UN Declaration of Human Rights, UNESCO Convention Against Discrimination in Educations, Convention of Rights of Children, Person with Disability Act, UN Convention on Right of Person with Disability, and the latest being Right of Persons with Disability Act 2016, which really brought a lot of changes. It compelled the local bodies and the countries to align their acts with the guidelines which were set. India was also a signatory to it. India also enabled a lot of actions in this direction. Several acts came into being, and the primary which enabled India to act fast was Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan, which was launched in 2015, which really enabled the education system to look forward towards the environment which is expected for disabled children. Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, where no rejection policy was framed and strived for implementation. Accessible India Campaign 2015, Smart Cities Mission, National Policy on Children. These all were the enabling programs which were supposed to provide accessibility in schools and better quality of education to the children with disabilities. However, the position remains that accessibility plans, these are fine words, but reality is often very different. In ground, we are not able to see the amount of changes people feel or the act should have been able to achieve. Uh, so there is a lot of work which is still required to be done. In that direction, I think beyond the legislative framework, which is already available to large extent, the implementation part is lacking. The cost of non-compliance is very low. In implementation and punishment system is also not effective. The society questioning the non-compliance is also to large extent lacking, in which I think UN Habitat has all the wherewithal to push forward and provide the tailwind for the movement. And I hope these type of programs will generate the right kind of discussions, which can involve all the stakeholders so that they ask right questions to the people who matter, and then only the solution and the right answer can come out. There are a lot of things on papers. We have most of us recognize disable friendliness with tactile tiles and ramp. These are the two which are normally people recognize, but it is much more beyond that what we see. Even the compliance level, what we see around the schools are even not achieving the basic minimum level. The resistance for achieving the even the basic minimum level is very high, because it doesn't add a lot of value to the school, which if it could add, then the situation might be different. One of the attempt was made earlier that by incorporating the ranking system, one of the prime component was made regarding disabled friendliness of the school. So that could generate at least some movement in the acceptability, especially in private sector, which are the biggest culprit. I think government to large extent is trying its level best to fund these things because of its support system and the entire ecosystem which supports the government setup, and its obligation for the rural and the lower income group where the real problem lies. So government is doing its bit by legislation funding. Recently, in Delhi government, lot of focus has been on the school education. In Since last 2016, our department has been able to add almost 20,000 schools classrooms to around 342 schools, and has enabled almost all the schools up to the minimum level of barrier-free standards, uh, by providing the basic minimum, which is the toilets, braille language, signboards, ramps, tactile tiles, contrasting colors, staircases, lifts with sufficient space for wheelchair. So these facilities were provided in almost all the government schools, which I think is lacking across the country. Private sector is still very far from reaching even the basic level. So lots required to be done in this aspect. The divide also is very wide in the public versus private sector, the rural versus urban sector, and the lower income schools versus normal schools. So these divides pose its own challenge because of the infrastructure cost which involves. The real challenge for the urban planner architects are how to bring the cost, bring down the cost, adopt better technologies, how the modern technologies can help in bridging this gap, reducing the cost of compliances. If the children cannot come to home to, in many of the disabilities, children cannot come to the school. So at least school can go to their homes, like in use of technology, virtual classes, etc., has developed to large extent after the COVID pandemic. So to what extent can we do a hybrid system where we can have some school part and also the residential part, so that we can impart the education what we really intend to provide. The scenario of the compliances are that if the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan schools were surveyed, and it was found that only 18% of such schools were barrier free. A similar survey was done across the country for 500 schools in 16 states in 2012, 2014, and it was found that at large number of places there was a barrier for movement, access was very limited, and that too it was for the midday meal locations, which by itself is a very big deterrent for the children to reach school. Midday meal was conceived with a concept that if the children gets the midday meal, children will be sent by the parents to go to the school, but the access itself is limited, which pose their own challenges. The other part, which is very essential, is the participation of private sector in the funding of the schools, the corporate governance, and the funding by way of social responsibility funding is very much lacking in this sector, which I think the UN Habitat can take it in a big way, so that the incentives in implementation can be given, if the funding is given by the private sector, so that some of the schools are made better compliant. Uh, as far as the CPWD's work is concerned, our presence has been across the country, dealing with large number of schools, particularly the government schools like Navodaya Vidyalayas, Kendriya Vidyalayas. We have constructed a lot of these schools. Recently, Eklavya schools in tribal area, far interiors of the country are being constructed by CPWD. These all schools we have ensured that the minimum compliance level, which is mandatory, are invariably provided, and we have been able to successfully provide in all these locations. CPWD architects were the pioneers in this field of universal accessibility, as they first published the CPWD publication on guidelines for barrier-free environment as early as 1998. That set the benchmark, and now it is considered one of the benchmark guidelines for accessibility uh, in schools. Recently, Ministry of Urban Development has come up with a publication in which CPWD was the driving force along with Ministry of Urban Development, which were partnered by IIT Roorkee and National Institute of Urban Affairs and Department of Empowerment of Person with Disability, Ministry of Social Justice, Government of India. This is a very recent guidelines, incorporate almost all gamut of things which are mandatory. I will advise everyone to kindly go through it. It will give a big insight in what are the possibilities and compliances incorporating the latest technology which the country can offer. Beyond this, when the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan was launched in 2015, our training institute located in Ghaziabad was designated as one of the National Research Institute for training for access auditors. In this, we had trained on almost 320 people from engineers to architect who were then sent for auditing the central government office buildings, and about 1200 central government office buildings have been audited and were finally made fully compliant with the accessibility guidelines. Similarly, these capacity building can be utilized by other stakeholders to further increase the number of access auditors who can go and increase the compliance level, and the frequency of compliance also can be increased, because the compliance the recurring facility of the providing of facility for compliances are lacking, and the access auditors, if they are sufficiently available, the implementation guideline can also make it mandatory for at least 1 or 2 years audit compliances, which can go a long way in implementation of all these things. These, because we are struggling with the implementation of the basic norms, so we are not at all thinking beyond what is minimum to reach it to the next level, and if possible to superlatives level, which still remains a dream for all of us. The all stakeholders, if this ecosystem support can be generated by activating the right person, going to the right bodies to for implementation of these guidelines, forcing them to implement these guidelines, then only we can be able to see the light of the day, or what we dream of, at least for the minimum compliance. Right now the situation is very grim, but it cannot be said that nothing has been done. Lot has been done. We have moved from where it was, say, 10 to 15 years, things were not so good. Now it has progressed to large extent, and we are very much hopeful that we will be going much more far by the help of all the stakeholders, and the stakeholder as powerful as UN Habitat, who has all the access and the ability for the government to push for implementation of the guidelines. But still in the country, things are far from what we expect. The real problem remains the swelling of the population, low per capita income in the country, limited share of government funding in the government schools, sorry, unwillingness of private sector to walk that extra mile in funding and ensuring it, uh, even resistance to bare minimum compliance level, high cost of infrastructure, ease of getting away with non-compliance. These are the bigger challenges which really the urban planners and the stakeholders require to overcome. Uh, to some extent, we can push forward if the right education is given and constant monitoring is also done, right projecting on the websites so that people can see. Marking schemes can be introduced. In ranking, schools can have a rating system which can be displayed in the schools. The way the recent example has been the way sustainability and green India movement for the buildings were able to achieve. Right now, it has become something which we can flaunt off. The people, some of the five-star hotels are flaunting that they are the biggest green building, and they are adopting where there is no requirement to adopt, but they are adopting willfully because it's add a lot of value to it. If we are able to create an ecosystem where the value can be added to it by a marking system, or the value addition, or the funding, that will help and go a long way in implementation of these guidelines. With that, I would like to thank you, and this was a short discussion and the lively audience, and that's all of me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And I actually now hand over to Professor Hemanti to move into the technical component. And introducing Professor Hemanti and Professor Chattopadhyay, who are professors at IIT Kharagpur, who are working with us as partners and who have helped us develop the training modules. So, Professor Hemanti, over to you. I'll just share the presentation.
Am I audible? Yeah. I thank you and Habitat for organizing this stakeholders meeting where we will be able to present our modules which we are preparing, and I also thank Srivastav for very successfully highlighting the gaps in the system that you did. So I think that sets the platform for our talk. Okay, now this program that we are developing for a city-wide capacity building program for disability inclusion in schools. Next. So Parulji had already explained the vision and the mission of this program and how it is aligned to the various sustainable development goals and targets. So I think I can skip this and I'll go to the next slide which explains the structure here. So taking clue from what our keynote speaker just said, that where exactly is the gap. So here we have prepared 4 modules in this, and our module 1 and module 2, these modules are targeted for sensitization of the school children, the school staff, the teachers, the HOS, and also the caregivers. So, and in December 18 and 19, we had conducted 2 very successful sessions in 2 of the Delhi government schools where we had presented this. And we also, and then our next 2 modules, that is module 3 and module 4, these are the technical contents, which actually talks about the existing gaps in the system that we feel. Now, module 3 and module 4, which we'll be presenting today for today's audience for the review. Now, go back, please. So what we felt while working on this project and while working on the field of inclusion for long, that the gap, I mean, when we try to either build a new building or when we to go for retrofitting solutions, the gap is either in the process of audit, that we need to understand that where exactly are the barriers, and next the proposals. So our module 3 talks about the planning and the technical design aspects. Now, as you very rightly said that since 1998 we have guidelines which have several times being revised in 2013, 2016, and now very recently in 2021. So in module 3 talks about how to translate these guidelines, how to interpret these guidelines by the engineers. So that is the focus of the module 3. And the module 4, which talks about the accessibility audit of the schools. Now we have developed quite an elaborate checklist for audit. Now we have this audit checklist, like we have referred to the harmonized guidelines and also the CFS manual that by UNICEF, which talks about the child-friendly school. So combining these 2, we have come up with this a very exhaustive audit checklist, and we will explain the process of audit in module 4. Now, just for your, we are not showing the checklist today, but for your knowledge, that the checklist consists of the 7 sectors within which there are about 32 components, and within these 32 components there are about 300 plus indicators which we have developed referring to the harmonized guideline and also the child-friendly school, which talks about some of the intangible aspects of inclusion as well. Now, coming to the module 3, we can move on. So these are the 5 major points which will be covered. Like we'll introduce the children with the disabilities. Now, as Adishi explained, that we are going to finally convert this to a self-paced online course. So we try to make it exhaustive. So we start from the setting the context to introduce that which are the components of gender inclusion in school, understanding the barriers, and then finally the interpretation, and we end with how the principles of inclusion of accessibility for children are aligned to the various global and national mission and agenda. Next, please. So who are the key persons involved? So module 3 and module 4 are mainly targeted towards the technical person, like what we mean are the civil engineers, architects, urban planners, infrastructure planners, contractors, and then developers, because they are actually implementing it on the site. So I will be in my presentation. I will be showing a few, instances of misinterpretation of guidelines which are very well led in the course. Teachers and staff, school administration, students and parents, but they were mainly in the module 1 and module 2, which is for the sensitization part. Next, please. Go ahead. Go ahead. So children with disabilities in movement, disability speech and hearing, seeing and intellectual disability. So these we have considered. And what are the barriers to inclusion? The barriers to inclusion are the physical barriers, the communication or the sensory barriers, attitudinal and social barriers, and institutional barriers. But for this module 3 and 4, which is comes in the domain of the engineers and the architects, we are considering on the physical barriers and the communication barriers. Next, please. Sir, you very just now mentioned about the statistics, so I'm skipping this. We are all aware of the problem, and these are the country's mandate, the RTE Act, the RPWD, the Divyangam Adhikar Adhiniyam, and the new NEP, which all of them which talk of the inclusive education or Sammilit Shiksha. Next. Accessible India campaign, the built environment accessibility, transport system accessibility, and also the ICT ecosystem accessibility. Go ahead, please. So we are aware of all this, but as I said, since we are also proposing this as a self-paced course, we just want to have the context set. Go ahead, please. Fine. So go ahead. Move ahead. I think we are going back. Yeah, next, please. Next. So that brings us that what is inclusion, where we talk about full participation. Go. So coming to the specific accessibility principles and guidelines for schools, please. So these are the various zones. Now the checklist that I was talking about that we have prepared for schools talk about these 7 zones, like these are the site entrance and school premises. Next we have the horizontal and vertical movement. Third, we have the wash facilities, that is water, sanitation and hygiene. And next we have the academic places, the extracurricular activities, and last but not the least, the digital infrastructure. Next. Components of inclusion in school. So these are all components of inclusion, which also talks about accessible communication and teaching accessible policies. But our part, this module 3 and module 4, very specifically talks about the accessible infrastructure. Accessible infrastructure in school premises, wash, built environment, and play and activity areas. Next. So what are the steps which the technical expert would go through? First, the preparation of the drawing preparation. Now, while the drawing preparation, there are certain technical and conceptual parameters. The technical parameters probably which are related to various dimensions. And the conceptual parameters, maybe when we are talking about an environment which is required for the proper mental and physical development of the children, certain things which are borrowed from the CSF, that is the child-friendly school concept. Selection of materials. Properly, we have seen examples where a proper dimensioned room or can go wrong by selecting improper finish. I mean, just to give an example, with one of the audits that we did in December, we found that there was a nice ramp following all the specification of 1:12 slope, but the teachers only, the caregivers and the special educators, they pointed that the material selection was granite, and which was not actually compatible to the the requirement. So it is important that we get into these nitty-gritties, get into this detailing and understand these detailings, and particularly the contractors understand this detailing. The process of procurement, tendering, specification and costing. Some of the items are well included in the DSR, which are there, but some of the items are not included. I think for that we have to do separate rate analysis and all. And also sometimes we also procure it. I think before coming here, I had a very elaborate discussion with our CCM, that is the civil construction and maintenance section in our IIT Kharagpur, and my engineers, they share very feedback with us. So they shared that they have problem in selecting the materials from the open market. So that also should be done very considering the specifications. And of course, implementation and construction and site. I should show some very interesting examples of misinterpreting guidelines. And last but not the least, the post-occupancy evaluation. There are two ways to do it. One is the audit, that is the module 4 talks about this. Another one is the simulation exercise, which is the role-playing exercise. So drawing preparation and the technical conceptual parameters, I will run through the slides. So these are the certain things which are there. Like we are aware of how to what should the dimension of the internal corridors, but how exactly the laying of the tactile tiles is done is important. Go back, please. So now for this one, like say we are aware of the width of the door. Width of the door is being told that 900 millimeter. But if we have a 900 millimeter wide door with a collapsible gate, probably that does not work. So we have to know that we have to go up to that level of detailing. Next. Think of this toilet. What CPWD, the harmonized guideline will tell us this. But this is an example from a place which I don't want to name, where I'm standing in front of the mirror and where the placement of the mirror is done in such a way that it is just meant for a person who is sitting on the wheelchair. And when I asked the architect that why did you do so, he said that ma'am, ye disabled logon ke liye hai. But a person who is standing on us with using a crutch, can you see that? No. For that, we have to use that inclined mirror. So these are the missing detailing which just a 1500 by 1500 turning radius does not serve. So we have to go to that level. Next. Similar, these are again dimensional detailing. Next. Yeah, this I was talking of the conceptual parameters. Now the conceptual parameters, like we are aware that 900 millimeters should be the the aisle width, but having a separate seating zone for students with disability, so that there is a glare-free viewing to the blackboard for children with not blind people, but for vision impairment. That is important. So that is these are certain conceptual parameters, and locating them to an accessible route. So that flexibility is important. Next. It is important that these are again extracts from the UNICEF guidelines, that CFS, that the zones of the classroom, because we are looking towards the holistic development of the children, where we are not only letting them take their wheelchair, but giving them freedom also. So for that, how the zones of the classroom will be divided. So while we are preparing the drawing, so these are at the drawing preparation stages, these sensitization is required, these things should be separate, special drawings should be made for this. Next. Similarly, I mean, this is for the libraries where the furniture is important, enclosed rooms are important, good viewing angle for the laboratories, flexible sitting arrangement is important, safety provisions, the high contrast, and so while selecting the color of the library, color of the laboratory walls, even that is important. Next. Coming to the next section, that is the finishes, material selection, and detailing. Go ahead. We know that elevator, we know the dimension of the elevator, but what probably are the additional features, how to make the elevator totally work from start to beginning. That we cannot have this collapsible door. Even if we have the sensor operated door without the grab bars inside, that doesn't work. You have to have a proper elevator and a proper guiding tile which would lead to the place from where someone can exactly feel and touch the button to stop the elevator. So that level of detailing is important. Door 900 millimeter is fine, but I mean, how much force should we be applying for door? How the door handle should be. Any handle doesn't work. A lever type handle is working. A door knob is not recommended for I mean, when we order in mass, when we order for a project rate and we order in mass, definitely the barrier free doors have to have the separate these door hardwares as well. The bolting or latching mechanism needs to be separate. So every single part, just not 900 millimeter dimension. As sir, you very rightly said that these ramps and tactile tiles we are aware of. Awareness has reached up to that level, but I think we have to take it to the next step level where we think about all these detailing. Next. Think of this toilet. This is the harmonized guideline, and what we have, maybe it has been followed in a barrier-free toilet, but probably what we see that certain things, the height of the toilet while doing, I mean, somebody has just put this pedestal there which increases the height. We see that the placement of the WC in the second picture, where there is no space on the sides. Why is that a problem? Let's see next. How does we have to think that how does a person move from a wheelchair to the WC? Parallel transfer, diagonal transfer, or this direct transfer. So we have to have adequate space in beside the WC so that the wheelchair can be parked properly and the transfer is easy. So cubicles, you see all these cubicles are 1.5 by 1.5, but the placement of the sanitary fixtures make all the difference. Next. This choice when we are choosing, I mean, these are certain things to the best of my knowledge are not there still in the DSR. If we probably include it, these things, it might be easier for our engineers, because my engineers were saying that when they have to do the, the rate analysis for such things, it becomes a slight problematic. So these are some of the examples that we have picked up from India Mart. My scholar Umesh was helping me in this. But so here we have to be very clear about the specification, that what should be the load bearing capacity of these I mean, these specifications are also important. Next. Choice of again procuring in mass the CP fittings doesn't work. We have to use the particular faucets which are recommended for barrier free. Next. Furniture. Next. Certain things like anti-skid flooring, sufficient lighting as per standard, choice of the color of the painting, the ceiling heights, and the windows. Next. The other system, I mean, not only the grab bars, but this elevated door announcement system, these are not very expensive. I mean, and these can be retrofitted also. Signage is important. Yeah, I mean, so you were just talking about the braille signage and all. So we have to be not only signage, but go to the next one. I mean, we have to, particularly for emergency evacuation. Emergency evacuation, during the time of emergency evacuation, we have to have different types of, the different ways to communicate the system. Think about a fire escape platform which is not accessible. Go. Braille signage, the choice of font. These are, we have standards for this, just required to be followed. Next. Accessible play furnitures and room interiors. So obstruction-free pathway we are aware, but heat-resistant material with smooth and firm surfaces, rubber or compact sand, because they might fall. A person who is vision impaired might fall. So the ground must be prepared so that he doesn't hurt himself or herself. Next. Coming to the procurement specification and costing part. So here, let us see one example that. If we just look at the first image, there are so many components. There are the tactile tiles, there are the anti-skid tiles, outdoor tiles, and we have the these SS railings. DSR talks about the anti-skid, the tactile tiles, but sometimes like that in the figure at the center, which is red and white pattern, that we use sometimes very conveniently for open plazas because they have because of the friction, they have an anti-skid nature. But if you just see the the protrusions there, they are similar to the hazardous tile. So that might create a misinterpretation. So we must be extremely careful while choosing. I mean, there are two types of tiles, as you can see. We have to be very careful in choosing each specific tile and also laying them. We have guidelines on the ramp, on the slope of the ramp, that is 1:12. Next. But even two examples I want to highlight. First image where the ramp has a very good slope. It is, in fact, it is less than 1:12. It is almost 1:15, which is very comfortable. But as you can see, the slope ends later and the railing ends before the slope ends. So there is again because just think of a person, the person who is vision impaired. He or she is moving across that path, following that railing. So he would think that at a red point, the ramp actually ends, but the ramp does not end there. The slope does not end there. So there is a misinterpretation. The next one is even more pathetic. I mean, you can see these are the directional tiles. So these directional tiles have a special meaning for vision impaired people. But I asked the engineer who did it, that why did you put it in this way, in this direction? He said that, ma'am, isme friction acha aayega. But that is not the purpose of this. So this I was talking about the implement. I mean, you have to understand, the contractors need to understand, need to interpret the purpose of this, and then only I think we can have a we have things in place, we have everything in place, but they needs to be translated properly. So that's the purpose of our this module. Okay. So this is fine, just to give some ideas. I mean, this we are including in the context. Chalo. So in case we have carpets and all, we can go for this, because this is also something that we are told that in case of carpet, how to lay the tiles. Next, implementation and construction. Go. So we know that where to just giving a ramp is not enough. Just a ramp with a proper railing is important. So every component of a ramp needs to be followed. Next. I mean, we are giving a barrier-free signage, but if you see the slope of the ramp, or in the above picture, that where you have a slope where the ramp is given, but somehow could not be met properly. The slope could not be negotiated, so given a few steps in front of the ramp. Next. We should actually guide the person and not misguide them. I think the pictures, these are all from Delhi, and the pictures are self-explanatory. We have this, we should understand this, how to deal and negotiate each. These are all from CPWD, but I think I was just testing that with my engineers, then many of them are not aware of exactly the laying principles. Next. Next, we have to design, and now digital inclusion is very important nowadays. But so, I mean, now what the engineers or the architect's role is to create a envelope where the digital inclusion can be possible. Next. So, I mean, say when we are talking about this induction loop in the class, I mean, what's the simple thing? I mean, what the engineers we need to do, we need to have provision for wiring system and the layout, which will be conforming to this, to use of the proper usage of this digital infrastructure. Next. So, this is how we end module 3, like principles of inclusion, how they are aligned to the global and the national scenario. We are talking about, I think we are having so much of events nowadays where SDG, localization of SDG is one of the focus and thrust and focus of our Niti Aayog. And this is Parulji already explained that which are the sustainable development goals which we are catering to by following this. Next. CRC convention, this was one of the pioneering convention, CRC, child right now in the schools, and they also support this. So these are all supportive, I mean, documents and the visions that we have, which will motivate the engineers and the architects to align their work, to understand and appreciate and think about it. Next. Yeah, I think we can just, how CRC various articles are just for knowledge. We are including this, the provisions of the RTE service, and how they are connected to this inclusive education. Next. WD Act, which talks about this alignment. Next. This I would just like to, this is UDIP, Universal Design India Principles. I think you're aware of all the 7 principles, or this 7 global principles which were developed in 1990s by the US universities, but later on this was developed in 2011, in which 9 of us were involved, and which focuses on the Indianness and inclusivity as they relate to the age, gender, and disability. So with a special focus on the cultural acceptance of the solutions that we give, and it should also be economic to it, affordable to it, because unless and until we can have every place actually accessible, it is not I mean, the purpose doesn't serve. So our particular stress on this was the affordability and the cultural accessibility. So it was developed by 9 experts, and I was a part of this in 2011. Next. Module 3 ends, which talks about the translating the guidelines and interpret. So this is, I just shown the few, I mean, the actual module will be in more detail, where we'll be giving of more examples. So with your permission, I will go to the next module, which is brief one, which talks about the audit part. So this is the gap identification, practical steps for inclusive schools, a hands-on manual. So here we go through the various steps. We will be explaining the how to conduct the access audit. Next. Go ahead. Go ahead, please. Go ahead. Yeah. So these are the 7 steps. starting from the stakeholders meeting to understanding the scope of work, sharing of the architectural drawings and reconnaissance, detailed accessibility audit with stakeholders participation. We will follow the standards of the Accessible India campaign audit, that what is the requirement of the audit team. The audit team will be framed based on that. Then access audit findings, discussions and accessibility strategies for retrofitting and inclusion. This is particularly stressed upon because many of our, it is definitely much easier to plan a accessible building, new accessible building, but giving retrofitting solutions is most difficult and more challenging. And of course, then strategy based on. Next, please. I think we can move on. So the stakeholders meeting with the access team, I've just included some of the photographs of my past audit. So where it was the identification of the goals and the objectives. Next. Next is sharing of the architectural drawings with the visuals. Now, it is important that when we conduct these accessibility audits, we need to define the zones of the building and divide it into and have different groups working on these different zones. Next. Then we go for the reconnaissance survey, capture the visuals. Step 4. Umesh, next please. Yeah, so this is the detailed access audit with the help of this checklist. Here I was talking about this 300 plus parameter checklist. So this is the most important and the tedious part of the audit, where we actually have to go for measuring and see that whether the different different indicators which have been parameters which have been included in this checklist, whether the building or the service or the facility which is being audited conform to those or not. So this is how we continue, and we have to have the what is required, what is the and also what we can do here. We can. It is best that it is recommended that we have some representative from the target group doing the audit with us. Otherwise, these are some of our some of our class exercises which we have done with the help of the faculty members and students. Next. Okay. Now, this is the checklist that we have. And now these are the 5-point scales that we have included. We have referred to the United Nations standards here. And so exceeds requirement. I think even harmonized guideline has a similar subjective one, which we also seen, where it talks of starting from hazardous to can be treated as best practice, a 5-point scale that we have. But we have followed this is our partnership with UN Habitat. We have followed this even United Nations accepted checklist. And if you see that exceeds requirement, that is similar to what we call is one of the best practice, meets requirement, approaches requirement, missing and not applicable. Now, why we have got not applicable is maybe because in the checklist, it talks about sometimes whether there is an elevator to the next level. It might be a single story building where it is not applicable. It might be that. So since we are talking about an holistic rating and holistic scoring, I think we have this not applicable principle, and this is from. I think this is what our past experience with NIUS says, that this is a very important component that we should have, that not applicable principle. Please ahead. So now I was talking of these, these zones, these entry and school premises. And so these are the 7 zones on this side: entry and school premises, vertical and horizontal movement, wash and other facilities, again, emergency exit, wayfinding communication, academic spaces, extracurricular activities, and digital infrastructure, and the guidelines. So these are all the subcomponents that we have, and the relevant sections from Harmonized Guidelines 2021, which we have followed as a basis. So next, last part is the compilation of the audit findings. So this is in the form of checklist, and which needs to be filled in along with the supportive photograph, which we will explain. Go ahead. So this is the scoring system, accessibility assessment scale that we are having. And then this is important as since I didn't have, I've used some of my class, exercises only to explain, whereby when the students have come up with some drawings and proposals as retrofitting solutions, like they have found out the problems. Next. Wherever they have identified the problems, they have taken the photographs, proper photographs, and next. And they have given solutions. They have simulated this. They have got the, in front of the building. They have added this part. They have developed this partially in 3D models they have developed, and with minimum intervention they have given this retrofitting solution. I think this is the most important part because this is the outcome. This is what we finally want to do. Okay. Like this, this is how the toilet cubicles can be modified, how we can have these ramps added to a building which earlier just had steps. Next. This is a stramp that they have thought. This is our architecture building, which we have a separate barrier-free entry towards the back. But this is our main entry, and we thought of, since we are always talking about the non-stigmatization and non-segregation, we thought that our main entry, if can be made barrier-free. So they have given some. They have done a exhaustive measure drawing and given some kind of a solution where a stramp can be used. Summarize. I think we can skip this. I will just, how much time I have, Adishi? I'll just take 2 minutes to show the simulation exercise. Yeah, because we wanted more of interaction, and if we can always come back to the modules. So this is the simulation exercise that we have conducted in 18th and 19th of December in the 2 of the schools in the in Delhi, and I think we had good number of about 100 participations. And these are now the difference between audit and simulation exercise. Just to clarify, how we have seen is audit is actually done by the technical person with the help of someone from the target group, whereby we do a thorough assessment and measurement of the various components and do a rating. And this is here kind of the role playing, whereby the able-bodied, temporarily able-bodied person are requested to play the role of a visible person, so that means we simulate the disability and make them perform the activities, which are some very common activities. Next. So there are some pre-exercise preparations. So this module also we will be using as a training material, whereby the steps of the simulation exercise will be highlighted. Next. Step 1, that what should be, how do we, formation of the finding of the route to be followed, formation of the groups, explanation of the task to be done. So these are the pre-exercise preparation, getting the props ready for simulation. Next. Step 2, the actual simulation exercise. So first, the briefing of the participant. So whereby the different types of vulnerabilities are explained. Like this, what we did, we explained that what are the types of disabilities that we will be role playing today. So this was one of our school exercise where we can see the participants are there. Professor Padaya was explaining. Go ahead. Then what are the disabilities you can simulate? Physical disability by tying one leg and also making them sit on the wheelchair. Hearing impairment by using a pair of industrial ear protectors with cotton wools. Next. Vision impairment. I mean, this is very simple, I think, to do, and using cataract. Next. The elderly, so heart condition or fatigue due to age, and of course gender. Next. So next we have to demonstrate the use of the devices, so that it is, because safety is of paramount importance here. So nobody should be injured while performing this. So also we make it a point that with every participant we had groups of 2. So with every participant who was role playing, there was another person to take care of him or her, so that the safety is taken care of. Next, so the demonstration was done. Then the participants were asked to follow the designated route. We were just guiding them, if required, slightly touching them and then and aligning them in case they were not, going beyond the route. Then it continued. Next. So then the final was that we had 2 observation forms. Well, the vulnerable person, 2 observation form. One was for the vulnerable person, and one was for the observer, where we asked them to give feedback about what they had been and what are the major problems they had. How did they identify? How did they overcome those? When did they have the problem? Like that. Go ahead. So it was a reporting and the briefing session where they were asked to talk about all these, talk about about the problems they faced. Next. That's how it ends. So these are the 3 modules that we have. I hand it over to Adishi for taking it forward. I think we can start the introduction session and Sir can coordinate.
So thank you so much, Professor Hemanti, and for giving us clearly a brief overview, because the modules are very extensive, but we wanted to capture a snapshot of what is it that we will cover in the modules. And of course, we will try to make it more interactive when it rolls out as a training or as a course. So after this, we will actually like to kick off like a discussion on the modules and also any other thoughts that our participants here have. But before that, if I could quickly request Sri Mukesh Chand, who has joined us today. So he supported us a lot in our training programs in the schools that we conducted. So he is from the Director of Education in the Government of Delhi. And his support was very important for us because we could recognize these schools where we could go and conduct the pilot program. So, sir, if I could request you to share some experiences and also any inputs that you would like to share for how we can move forward with these programs.
Good morning, everybody. हम लोगों ने शुरू में बिकॉज इस इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन ब्रांच को मैंने 16 में ज्वाइन किया, उससे पहले आई वाज हेडिंग अ स्कूल। तो वो जो चीज़ों को देखा है और ये 2016 आने के बाद जो बैरियर फ्री का जो शुरू हुआ, तो उन चीज़ों को बीच में हमने शुरू भी किया, ऑडिट भी करवाया, बट वही है कि थोड़ी सी प्रॉब्लम जो हम लोगों ने फेस की है, 2 बातें मैम ने जो कही, एक तो रेट्रोफिटिंग की बात है, एक नई बिल्डिंग्स की बात है, बिल्कुल क्लियर कट से। तो जो मुझे मेन मुद्दा लगता है इसमें कि जो हमारे इंजीनियर्स हैं, दोज हु आर डूइंग दिस, वो थोड़ा सा एक ट्रू लेटर एंड स्पिरिट में उस चीज़ को थोड़ा सा ज़्यादा सेंसिटाइजेशन उस किस्म का चाहिए। तो हम लोगों ने भी अपनी बिल्डिंग्स का करवाया और फिर सेक्रेटरी पीडब्ल्यूडी के साथ भी हम लोगों ने मीटिंग करी, और हमारे सभी लोगों की ये मंशा है, डायरेक्टर सेक्रेटरी वगैरह की, कि स्कूलों का प्रॉपर ऑडिट हो, राइट। और उसके लिए हमने एक हैंडबुक भी बनाई, सबको दी, और उसमें ये कोशिश करी, लेकिन वो चीज़ें अभी जो है, और फिर उसमें भी थोड़ा सा एक जो यूनिसेफ की और ये जो यूएन की गाइडलाइंस वगैरह हैं उसके हिसाब से उसमें चेंज हुआ है 21 के हिसाब से। तो मैं समझता हूँ कि ये एक बहुत बड़ा काम है जिसके 2 स्टेप्स हैं। एक तो ये कि प्रॉपर इंटेंसिव वे में उसका ऑडिट हो, और उसमें टोटलिटी में, चाहे हम शुरू में कम करें लेकिन वो पूरा होना चाहिए। अब जैसे अभी मैम ने बताया कि बिकॉज आई वाज इन टच विद कमिश्नर डिसेबिलिटी धारियाल साहब के साथ, तो वो कहते थे मुकेश जी आपके नए स्कूल की बिल्डिंग तो बन गई है, लेकिन उसमें भी वो बैरियर फ्री नहीं है। वो अपनी टीम भेजते थे, तो वो टीम जाके जब चेक करती थी तो बड़ी सारी चीज़ें थी। तो उसमें जो हमारे इंजीनियर्स हैं पर्टिकुलरली, उनका मेन उसमें ये है कि उसको बड़े रिलीजियसली उसको फॉलो करना पड़ेगा कि भाई जो हमारी वो है स्कूल की, और जो इसमें मैं समझता हूँ कि ये काम जो टीम कर रही है यूएन हैबिटेट की, ये बहुत ही इम्पॉर्टेंट, बहुत क्रूशियल टाइम काम है, और एक फेज्ड मैनर में वो चलेगा, तो मैं समझता हूँ बहुत अच्छा होगा। तो हमने 2 प्रोग्राम्स अपने बच्चों के साथ और टीचर्स के साथ और स्टेक होल्डर्स के साथ, सबके साथ किए हैं। तो वी आर विलिंग कि ये काम हो। कल भी हम लोगों ने एक मीटिंग अपने ऑफिस में रखी थी टीम के साथ, तो आई होप कि ये बहुत अच्छा एक इनिशिएटिव है, एंड आई अप्रिशिएट दिस इनिशिएटिव।
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much,
Right.
sir. And may I hand over to Parul to just conduct the discussion and any facilitation there?
Yes. No, I really, as we have seen from Mr. Srivastav and Mr. Bahadur and also the Professor Banerjee, that we have come a long way about from where we were in looking at how to start the debate and discussion and make those small steps, but still a long path to cover. And before I, so before I kind of open up, I have just one really burning question, and this is for for Mr. Srivastava, that now what is it that we can do? I mean, we have the technical expertise, the knowledge that IIT Kharagpur is bringing in from the UN, the UNICEF, UN Habitat. So we have a large mandate and the platform to keep emphasizing, bringing in convening meetings such as these, but the actual practical implementation, and you've also mentioned those around compliance, around costs, around training. So what are those some specific actions or interventions that we can take, or you see that could take this towards better design and implementation of the laws?
I was mentioning that UN has such a big mandate and definitely has wherewithal to push things through the government, through implementation, through private sector, all through inclusive. So the real purpose, what I suggest and what I expect that UN can go forward and enforce implementation part of it, which is sincerely, which is lacking from all the aspects. Uh, the audit part, compliances, and its review part can be forced to the government, to the policy makers, and some point system or compliances can be insisted upon. So that will go a long way in implementation. Maybe it will not reap benefits in near future, but it will definitely in 3 4 years 5 years the changes will definitely be coming, because now it is more of a word than actual thing which is going on. Nothing is going beyond the government sector, and private sector participation is to large extent lacking, which I think UN can have a bigger role, because as far as the government, the bare minimum compliances are very necessary, and government tries to ensure to the level possible, but then the private sector is to large extent missing. Leave aside the top end schools, the most of the schools which across the country are for the lower level income groups and rural areas are largely lacking with even the basic facilities. In that part, I would prefer UN can intervene and push the policymakers to implement it. Thank you.
Mr. Srivastava, so I open the floor to our, our very, yes, the expert group here.
My name is Anil Joshi. I am a accessibility evangelist, having worked for IBM Research as a program director for accessibility. So most of my work, professional work, was in the digital inclusion and digital accessibility innovation. But other than that, I'm a parent. And I work across disabilities, and my daughter has intellectual challenges. There are a couple of observations and points. If you're talking about leaving no one behind, then in my view, we need to start from the most neglected, most marginalized group. So far, what has been happening is we have been talking about mobility impaired, we have been talking about visually challenged, and then are we really addressing that issue of no one being left behind? Point number one. I quite agree with Mukeshji, uh, who mentioned that let's not talk about so much of work being done and we have traveled a long distance. Let's do it in small pieces, but let's do it completely. What it means is, being an engineer, my observation over the past 20 years is that we have ended up in creating a lot of accessibility junk. I can show you a recent example of Indian Railways Facilitation Center in New Delhi here. They have a beautiful ramp which is only obstructing the entrance. It's in right angle and it's useless. So you are actually devaluing the existing infrastructure, which could be totally inaccessible but otherwise useful. You understand what I'm trying to say, and that's where I have a suggestion to Professor Hemanti. Can we really afford to say we have 5 grades of accessibility compliant or not compliant or needs improvement? To me, it's no. It has to be go or no go. If we can really think about it, see, universal design principles are there. We do it in small numbers, but we do it completely. Only then we are going to start our meaningful journey. Otherwise, ever since the accessibility guidelines have come up, it has been 2 decades, and we have wasted the future of at least 3 to 4 generation of school children. Sorry if I'm appearing to be harsh.
Not at all, sir. I think I fully agree to you that it has to be 100%. The purpose of this 5 grade is to understand where we are, whether we move from 0 to 5 for a particular case or we need to move from 3 to 5. That is it. But definitely target is 5.
Unfortunately, in our country, there is no continuum. So it remains there. So that's where I said we have been creating a lot of accessibility junk, garbage. And I was just mentioning to someone, I would be keen on knowing at least one railway station, to take an example, which has used the tactile tiles the way they should have been used. Any one railway station across India. And we have been talking about, I was a part of the initial conceptualization discussion of Accessible India campaign as well. Mr. Mukesh Jain and I used to work together on that. So, I mean, where are we? I mean, why do we blindfold ourselves and waste such huge national resources?
Yeah. Adarshi, can I?
Yeah, and then Ruchi will come up. Yeah, sure.
You want to say something first?
Please respond.
Okay. No, it's not a response. It's not a response. It's an open forum and we are all open to discussion. Yeah, there's no question answer. So thanks very much for the opportunity. And I would say that I tend to agree with all that has been said. And I'll put my observations in 5 bullet points. Number 1 is a concept limitation. And what you have just said and what our chief engineer also said is a concept limitation. When we are talking about accessibility, we are mostly thinking about ramps, rails, and tiles. It's much beyond ramps, rails, and tiles. There is a concept limitation. We have tried to do the sensitization to see that the horizons are broadened up. So number 1 is concept limitation. Number 2 is technical limitation. There is a huge amount of technical limitation which we tried to showcase, like wrong choice of tile, wrong laying out. I mean, as you just now asked us, one railway station, I thought Bhubaneswar has done a reasonably good job. We've been there. I can still find loopholes, but I thought Bhubaneswar had done a good job, and there are other places. But then, it's as I said, we think that putting ramps, rails, and tiles is making it accessible. It's a tick mark. That's not the way. So that is the technical limitation. That's the wrong material selection, wrong material placement, and all the things can come under that. Number 3 is wrong implementation. You see, the way it has been implemented, it leads to, we have seen, in fact, we had stopped one of the sensory parks being inaugurated because we found that the guide tiles and the stop tiles were at loggerheads. They didn't exactly know. So that's just one small example. D is maintenance. We do something and then because of lack of maintenance, it really gets, into a death trap. It oftentimes becomes a wrong way of maintaining or looking at it. People have a very low maintenance regard in this country, and we think that maintenance also causes a lot of junk. And E is a priority issue, which Chief Engineer was highlighting again and again, that the private schools and many other schools do not see it as a priority. They have other things. And I come from a family where there is a person who is involved in school administration. So I can understand when I debate with her that what are the priorities, and then they have a lot of other priorities. I just can't say that we can thrust it upon them. So what is the solution coming out of this room? Maybe if I can, if I may, I think, like I have very recently seen in a case where my mother was in hospital, and she was there for a good 12 days. The doctor said, we are following a protocol. The protocol is laid. If the pressure is going down, if the pulse rate is going up, this is the protocol. No other hospital or no other doctor will do anything other than this. Okay? Can we establish a protocol? And that protocol should be a checkpoint which are non-negotiable. Okay? I borrow it from your colleague. I liked it. So can we have a protocol in place? Even during COVID, I talked with doctors and they said that there is a standard protocol can be revised. Protocol can be wrong also because we are learning. But the protocol has to come. In COVID also, all doctors were given a protocol and the in charge said that if it happens, this is what you have to do. So can we have a non-negotiable checkpoint? And number two, I thought I've seen that PDI system, which is pre-delivery inspection, which is for vehicles. They always have, I mean, the car has been manufactured keeping strict standards, I assume, robotized oftentimes. But even after all that, before delivery, they have to do a PDI and put a OK. This pre-delivery inspection ensures that even after all possible steps were taken, did we miss out something? I think that Engineer Saab can tell us that can we have a similar concept that before we say that this building is fit for use, a fitness or a use certificate, or after retrofitting it is fit for use, can we have a PDI that yes, it has gone through 17 checkpoints and I am issuing a PDI and this building is now fit for, I mean, it has been retrofitted to our satisfaction or it's a new building, which is a simpler case in that case. So I thought that I'll start up the discussion this way. I'm open for more discussion. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ruchi, and I run an organization called Humankind, and we co-create school zones with school communities. So school zones are basically how students will access school zones. And I want to while I was looking at the work, ma'am, you presented, and the context setting that sir had done. A lot of things related to our work. We are currently working with the Delhi government, anchored by the Transport Department, Directorate of Education and Public Works Department. We are creating how can we create access to schools more inclusive, safe and accessible. So again, the same thing. And we are working with government schools, private schools, only girls, only boys, shift schools, temporal. So, you know, it's a lot of deep understanding heard from school management committees, parents, students themselves. Students create their plans for our work, and then PWD has to execute it. So it's like this intersectional aspect across different departments. It's not easy. Sir also knows how education system and teachers are always stressed in terms of new curriculums coming, but their participation is key and the ownership is also key. So some of the insights that I wanted to just flag for the room here, and maybe we can come back to it, is one is while technically, just to mention, we are working with IIT Delhi, the TRIP Center on this entire thing. And one is when we work on safer school zones, we are looking at what is the culture of safety. So is there a culture of inclusion already existing? And it depends, you know, it doesn't matter in terms of which organization we are talking about. The government is an organization, the school is an organization, the family unit is an organization, the classroom is an organization. So what is the culture of inclusion there? Because if we understand and sense it, then we can actually put these modules in context. What we've understood is that we've been working on accessibility to schools, IRC updations, all of this. But as you go into what a PWD engineer knows about their IRCs, or if schools know about accessibility, there is a huge gap. So how do you do bottom-up approaches? And that is what we are doing in terms of co-creation. and co-execution and co-building and co-ownership with communities. One thing when we look at this process is we need to understand it's very, very slow, because you're asking somebody to give time outside whatever their current mindset obligation is. But with the Transport Department and Directorate of Education, last November, something like a road safety club has been instituted in all schools, where children have an equal space with SMCs. So till now, the schools had SMCs, where only all the three pillars were there, but now we have the fourth pillar. And when that happens, something like this, we also have a modular approach to executing the project, but something where these modules can then sit. There is a small governing body where, these modules, they own it. They are the ones who propagate it within the school. They are the ones who question the PWD, or they are the ones who, so, you can't have it all, but there are some champions or leaders within school systems. DOE is working a lot to create student agency under the leadership of the director, the vision of the minister, but actual action. So my one suggestion was, when I was looking at your modules and coming, being an architect and urban designer and looking at all of this, yes, detailing is key, and that is the domain of the practitioner. Execution is key, that is the domain of the engineer, and owning it and like just owning it is what the schools have to do. Questioning is important. So what we've heard from school management committees is they know that they have to provide for children with special needs, who they call people with disabilities, but when they write letters, it doesn't move. So these are the undertones where everybody's trying to make it more inclusive, but how can we get it faster? Second, in terms of when PWD engineers are executing it, can procurement contracts have special definite clauses for the contractor, for the engineer? PWD engineer trainings, like I can vouch for it, like when we ask them about which IRC, what, when, they have not seen the updated guidelines. So can there be something that constantly provides them a knowledge, like go-to approach? Like if you don't have it, go here instead of opening books. So something which is very quick, and that is a shared resource with DOE also, so that the two can speak to each other and make each other accountable. And the best way to make people accountable is bring children and not leave them behind. In the road safety clubs, we have made it a mandate. There is one child with special need in the club, so that that empathy or understanding about in terms of their everyday lives of coming to school comes in. When COVID struck, these children with special needs, their families were even the ones who were hardest impacted, because, for example, I know in the schools we work, these children live in hostels, come from cities or villages outside India and outside Delhi, and then they live here. So once the schools closed, so how do these vulnerabilities then impact their life? I think very key and very important thing is not to see it only at accessibility, not to see it only as access to learning, but for children to feel inclusive. They see friendships in schools, and friendship and inclusion go hand in hand. So I think we need to put, like, it's a high order, we have to touch the sky in terms of that. And just to make it more fluid, intersectionality between different departments, how do we bring that in? I think it's a very tall order, but we are working on creating safer school zones through this aspect. And I think there are intersectionalities which I'll be happy to discuss later also. Thank you for being patient to listen to this.
Thank you, Ruchi. So we have a participant joining online, Dr. Anjali. If you're here, please go ahead with your question or feedback.
Thank you so much for giving this opportunity. I could not come personally, which I really wanted to. I want to highlight a couple of things which have been already said, but I want to flag in issues which are not yet been addressed. So one is when we are talking about a module or a retrofitting of a school, something very important that emerges is gender equality and inclusion. We all know that the girls with disabilities drop out more than the boys, and we have also have research studies showing that why these dropouts happening. So I really want to touch upon the kind of infrastructure that we provide is it gender safe? That is, if the girls can be included. Two, especially when we are talking about the water and sanitation hygiene, are we looking at services such as availability of water, running water in the accessible toilets, which we call as CWS in toilet. And this is what we have observed in our audits in many of the states in the country. But also specifically, we are currently working with the government of UP and government of Gujarat with UNICEF, and we have found that almost each and every girls' washroom or the CWSN washroom is missing on latches, ventilation, water, and we have found that even the operation part of it, somebody talked about maintenance, but it is very important that our operation part of it is also overlooked. The second thing I really want to highlight is the capacity building, because if there's a model that exists, we have been talking about IRC, we have a couple of other guidelines like making schools accessible for children with disabilities, which we got published through the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment and UNICEF as a partner. We also have a very recent accessibility audit toolkit which we have developed for the government of Gujarat. But many of times, if we don't provide capacity building to the implementing agency, then what happens is the type of barriers that we continue to see, that the tactile pavement configuration is not correct. Either they are leading to dustbins, or either they are leading to trees, or to dead walls, dead ends, or we find the sizes of the washrooms are not sufficient enough for even a wheelchair to enter inside, or the doors are not wide. So I will not go into the detailing of the dimensions, but what is important is that hand holding after the modules are made and we get the guidelines to this implementing agency to ensure that they have better understanding of what and why and for who. So if we have 21 types of disability, it's not that we can say that we are providing only for the 7 types of benchmark disabilities. We need to really look at other children with disabilities who have severe disabilities like intellectual disability, cerebral palsy, and many others. So this is my humble request, and I'm sure you will look at it. And at any point of time, some attempt is required to provide help and support in co-creating these modules. We are very much here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Anjali. And we also appreciate the support that Samartham could provide. And we will, of course, connect in the future on this. So now we have Nidhi. I just hand over the mic.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. This was, it was really, really good to hear all of the things, and the little, photos with the errors were really interesting, because someone living with a disability, those are lived realities for us and experiences. I'm Nidhi Goel. I lead an organization called Rising Flame. I founded it. We focus on working with women and youth with disabilities through leadership and rights. I'm also with this current opportunity of India's G20 presidency on the steering committee of C20. And it makes me think even more, because we have these multiple engagement groups and possibilities of giving more broader policy interventions and recommendations as well to our leaders through the U20 and C20 opportunities. So thank you for that. I'll keep some of my remarks brief, because I have a few points. I don't know if I missed it, but it'd be good if, when these training modules are delivered or planned, are there questions or some sort of estimation of difference in cost? Because, one of the major questions around accessibility, which everybody asks, is why should we, other than the human and the right and all of those angles, what are we doing around accessibility and cost? That the costs of building all of this is really high. So some comparison of cost, if that kind of module is, or information is included in this module, of what is inaccessibility, if you build a inaccessible building versus when you have an accessible structure, and what does to the cost of participation. So having some of those conversations, including individual elements of examples of retrofitting costs. So for example, it was mentioned about the elevator announcement system, and we know a lot of places now everything's going touch, right? And that's seen as advanced technology. So how are we talking about advancement of technology plus accessibility in terms of retrofitting and some of those cost examples. When we're talking about the current team, so yes, we're building capacities, and that will take to roll out these programs might take a while to have the next cadre of or group of engineers, architects who understand accessibility and implement it. So from building the conceptual to the implementation, understanding and capabilities might take time. So are we talking about also linking and building teams where encouraging engineers, etc., architects to work alongside disability and accessibility experts as a suggestion of teams who could immediately take up some of this work while we're investing in building capacity. Maintenance, as said, is a very important thing, and one of the examples of tactile, railway stations would have been the Mumbai local stations where there are beepers for the what they still call the handicap compartment, and there was tactile markings on the station, and one monsoon and everything gets washed off, so you actually don't know if there's a tactile marking, so you've reached the edge of the platform. So it's interesting around, and it's important around the emphasis of maintenance within these modules as well. I am repeating the next 2 points around training as well as procurement policies, and both are extremely important. So where are these trainings trickling down to? Where does it reach to? Who does it reach? Who's finally implementing? So what's the pipeline or the chain that needs to be trained? Would only the architects and the engineers sitting in offices, would that be enough? So I think training and sensitization, while is very important, also having linking up with the mandate of the procurement policies would be extremely important around what is being procured and from whom. And the final thing, as Ruchi mentioned, around school spaces, I think also to bring back to the table that we need to also equally emphasize, and I know it's mentioning, it's all encompassing the modules, but also equally emphasizing on the recreation spaces. Often we've seen that spaces which are more participatory and recreational, those are left out even in accessible and educational institutions. And the last is what my colleague Anjali ji just mentioned around gender sensitivity. So when we're making modules around disability sensitization, can we just link up with the gender sensitive school spaces as well, and not duplicate or not create parallel learnings, but also link them up and absorb them? That would be very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Nidhi. We now have Siddharth from WRI.
Hi, my name is Siddharth Yagarajan. I'm a senior program associate working with WRI. I have some observations for Professor, but I'd begin by WRI also works a lot around school safety and school zones. So taking on from what Ruchi said, so the IRC says, that safe school zones is somewhere between 400 to 500 meters. And what I understood, because you have these different parameters and you talk about site access as one of those. But my question to you was, that are you also looking at, what happens outside of schools within that 400 to 500 meters? Because even if the immediate access to school is something that, you're considering, but, for example, are they even able to cross the road? So, maybe there are some guidelines which can also look at what those safe school zones around those schools look like. The second thing I wanted to ask you was that we do talk about the audits and then the retrofitting, but we understand that a lot of these schools work with limited budgets. So when we actually want to get into execution or implementation, is there a way that we can prioritize or face this retrofitting, saying that these are the most critical aspects that one needs to look at? So maybe there is a rating for that as well, because if you want to work within a limited budget, maybe they might not be able to execute everything that the audit says. So what is the most critical that needs to be addressed, and maybe that can be dealt with first? The second thing I wanted to ask you was also that if this format that you're talking about, this audit, right? You said that you would also include somebody from the disabled community to be a part of the audit. So what is the format? Because right now I saw that uh, you have a printed format where you actually do the audit. So how do they? Okay, but does the audit also take into consideration whether
And that was for simulation and not for audit. Yeah, for the audit also we have a format.
Okay, you have a format which
Yeah,
can be used.
correct, correct.
Right. And my question with respect to simulation is that, is it only for sensitization, or does it also, feed into the actual assessment as well eventually?
It does. It does both.
It does both.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think
But the purpose of audit is to get more technical data.
Right.
And the purpose of simulation is actually to feel the problem by the technical person. But the audit, they have separate purpose. Simulation is more basic, is more at a conceptual level. You feel the difficulties in interaction.
Right.
Difficulties in interaction with the space or the systems, and the purpose of the audit is where you feel where you find out where exactly there is the lack of conformation with the acceptable standards.
Right, right.
So that's a more technical approach.
And my last question is, so once you're done with this audit, is there a post audit also done just to see, for example, your audit, through your audit, you realize that 60% of, probably this, just to give you a number, that 60% of the school was disabled friendly. But then after the interventions or after the retrofitting has done, do we have a process which says that is there a follow-up audit to see that, whether the interventions or the retrofitting that was done, did it actually meet the requirements or not? Do we have a provision for that as well?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we should do. That's what we are developing this scale. So where we can see that from maybe from one level, we are moving on to the third level, and from third level to the fourth level. Definitely, as I mean, our speaker said that it is a continuous process, and definitely a follow-up audit is extremely essential. And I also thank you for, taking up that issue of certain things which are absolutely non-negotiable. As Professor Chattopadhyay was also mentioning that there are certain components, certain indicators which are absolutely non-negotiable. If I might share with all one of our recent experiences with NIUA, where we were developing the inclusive city framework, where we had developed about 196 indicators for inclusion rating of the cities for 6 different identified sectors. So there also we had certain components which were made mandatory and certain components which we told aspirational. So I think that's a good suggestion, and I think this is absolutely essential. Yeah, please. I think without mic we cannot record.
I would just like to add on to the inclusive city framework that the Ministry of Housing, like a lot of conversation around here is around certification and assessment of accessibility. And the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs and the Ministry of Social Justice, on the guidelines of Ministry of Social Justice, NIUA with a set of experts, including IIT Kharagpur, IIT Roorkee, and other set of experts have come up with a Able India framework, which is actually giving certification, like it's a assessment framework for certification of buildings. Right now, presently, it is only for public buildings, but majority of the components can actually be extended onto the educational building. And in that also, the one of the key component has been identification of the mandatory and aspirational components. And I would like to Adishri, do I have time to complete all my comments? All right. So one thing I would like to just point out is the distinction between inclusion and accessibility. Although we are talking about accessibility only from disability perspective, but accessibility at large caters to a variety of components, including genders, including other aspects like temporary disability or chronic conditions and other those things. So universal design principles, when we say, they are actually more applicable to mainstream schools, but when we are talking about special schools, and that's also one of my observations, that maybe we can actually have like a few slides on the special schools which cater to all the other types of disabilities, like for example blind particularly, or persons working with autistic children or children with Down syndromes and things of that sort. So this particular thing, I think it is for inclusive education in the mainstream schools itself, which is majorly catering to the physical disabilities, and the special schools component also should get into this. Other than that, I just have two more points. One is before the drawing concept preparation, this design conceptualization, which actually the sensitization, which has been covered in the first two modules, play a very important role. So if we could actually integrate or have like a few slides, a few component on the design conceptualization and identification of the needs of the prospective, targeting students, is something which will make a lot of difference. The other point is, it's for consideration of the UN Habitat, that if we can actually integrate all of this to the guidebook and the the digital toolkit which we have created, which has a dedicated session on educational building itself. So it has actually gone beyond considering a lot of discussions and deliberation. It has gone one step further from the harmonized guidelines, so something which we can also look at. So these were a few of my points. Another small point from a visual perspective is all the ticks and the crosses which we have. Crosses are definitely the crosses, but the ticks also are not 100% accurate. So it will make a lot of difference if we can highlight the correct representation. Like one of the picture had a tactile, like all lift picture. So the lift door was correct, but the tactile there was wrong. So if we can have highlight the correct thing, that is something which is yes.
You can highlight which part is correct.
Yeah, thank you, Kanika. We have Sonia Arora.
Hi, Professor. First of all, I must say thank you that you have done a wonderful job. Thank you to UN Habitat also. My question is I just want to take further on his question. What about this, the zone or the area outside the school, like when the kids are boarding or deboarding the bus, or suppose when the kid deboarded the bus and then the area between deboarded the bus and the school gate, so there is a path, so whether that path is safe or not safe. So I think that is also very very important to look into this. And because as my when I drop my child in her school, so what I saw is that a lot of parents are coming on their own car and buses are also parked there. Kids are crossing here and there. They are moving haywire outside the school in the morning and obviously in the afternoon also. So that's not safe at all for the kids. So I think there should be a minimum checkpoint or checklist that school must have to follow. So that should be, I think, part of this guideline. The second thing is that can we prepare some kind of checklist for the government and for the school both? So at every end of the year, they must exchange that yes, they have done this. These are the mandatory things, and government can follow these guidelines and school can follow these guidelines. So basically a non-negotiable, as professor has rightly pointed out, but minimum negotiable points on both the sides, not only to the school but obviously to the government also. So I think that is very very important, because as I currently I'm working with the PwC as associate director. Earlier I was with Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, so I worked a lot to follow this national urban transport policy or metro rail policy. So we worked a lot to push the government on this accessibility or last mile connectivity to the public transport, be it's metro or the city bus services. So what I feel is that at implementation level it is completely missing. Like at planning level we are pushing government, at design level yes there is some sort of, but when you implement that thing it's completely missing. So there should be a minimum checkpoint at both the levels so that we can go further in this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I think I really appreciate that both of you have taken up the point of that the area immediately outside the school. So when I was explaining the zones, the first zone, that is the site entry and the school premises, our checklist includes the site entrance, where it talks about the safety of the footpath and the crossings just outside, whether there is adequate signage to identify the school and all. So just immediately outside, not the entire school zone of 400 to 500 meter, but because since our main target group are the school HOS, so they have to implement it. So we have kept our starting point at that level, but definitely when we talk about the inclusive cities, your point is absolutely important, but we have taken care of the areas immediately outside. And Kanika, what you were talking about this Able India, I think what Professor Chattopadhyay just said about that PDI, that pre-delivery inspection. So that is some kind of self-inspection that which the owner can do actually. That is the purpose of this Able India which we have developed. So where there is like a self-assessment checklist. So whether the building is fit or not. Mike.
the role of the government also is very important in acknowledging that thing, because like even if we can't talk about incentives at this point in time, but we can having it can be integrated into their completion certificate itself. So some sort of, and there's a differentiation between retrofitting and the newly constructed building, so that's also something which we have to acknowledge and integrate.
Yeah.
On this, the safe school zone, I just and the the zones and the groups which we have identified. There's a small observation that we have different disabilities also, and not only the zones. I mean, we can have different groups representing different types of disabilities, which can actually bring in enrich the entire accessibility audit process.
What specifics?
Yeah. So, first of all, I wanted to say thank you for an excellent presentation. Is it? Yeah, sorry. So, my name is Neha Visakha. I'm a senior resident fellow at Vidhi Center for Legal Policy. I think a lot of people have given very amazing technical remarks. So, I'm going to talk about what I felt was necessary from my perspective. I think one thing I felt was this was an excellent initiative, primarily because the feedback we constantly got was that there wasn't a shared vocabulary between architects and different kinds of stakeholders, right? So, you have different kinds of people interested in the context of accessibility. However, one thing that we got in a lot of the work that we were doing is that these kinds of guidelines have to be implementation ready, which often government documents are not. So that was one. But I just wanted to reiterate a couple of context points in the context of cross disability perspective, but also situating it to the cultural context of the place. For instance, when we analyzed not the new harmonized guidelines, but the older harmonized guidelines, there was no guideline on the Indian toilet or the Indian style toilet, what accessible Indian style toilets would look like. For instance, there was no image in the entire document. And in South India in particular, like there are very few public toilets that are actually Western toilets. So if you see a lot of areas, you still are working with infrastructure that does not look like this. And secondly, with respect to gender sensitivity, I was thinking in the context of one of the biggest reasons a lot of girls drop out of school is at the age of menstruation. Ensuring that there are actually sanitary pads available in school bathrooms, but also sanitary disposal is something that has to be linked both in the disability washroom, because I feel like there is a certain idea that the bathrooms that are, the intersectionality, like a lot of people have pointed out, is missing in that context. But I just wanted to, I think the larger point is, I felt like this addressed very a few number of disability groups in that are recognized under the law. And as I think one of the first speakers pointed out, I think schools are actually where children with both intellectual disabilities or even mental health conditions, for instance, are discovered. So requiring support that doesn't just look at infrastructure from a technical perspective, but looks at this from a social perspective is extremely important. Even if there is a checklist that is focusing on infrastructure, I believe that it would be useful to highlight the fact that we need schools themselves to become champions of disability inclusion, and that will only happen if we take into account children's participation directly. So I really liked what you talked about. The children have to be stakeholders, primarily because in conversations we've had, it sounds like what we might think a child with disability need might be completely different from what the child actually wants. So that was one thing I just wanted to highlight. And I just wanted to also add a little bit in terms of the cautioning that disability should not be exceptionalized but expanded, in the sense of thinking of universal accessibility not as something that a few students will require. The example I wanted to give is, for instance, a few universities, Xavier's in Bombay and Ashoka University, they have an office of learning support. This basically means that any child with any difficulty, student with difficulty, is going there to talk about it. Now, they might be a person with disability or learning disabilities, which become hugely important, which I think needs to be reflected. But it also creates a situation where students will start talking to people in the administration. And I believe that that is something that has to be emphasized, because when we treat this as a technical matter or like something that is a compliance issue, then it might stop and end with scrutiny from the government. But ideally, I believe that any kind of system has to create a certain kind of process that becomes self-sufficient and scalable by itself. And I wanted to actually add that schools actually might be a great place to also generate democracy in that context, to engage students in a process where their concerns are directly addressed, so that even if the toolkit can't completely look at it, some of these could be are there regular meetings with students? That could be part of the checklist. Is there a way in which a survey is being done in terms of, and I feel like that can address some of the concerns of budget, because maybe the school doesn't have students of a particular disability, but they can start focusing on what their immediate needs are. Finally, I just wanted to add a little bit about safety. I'm a researcher of safety. I study safety from a feminist perspective, and my research shows that CCTVs actually don't necessarily ensure safety. They're a security measure. And often, and I went to a corporate high school where we would have CCTVs in classrooms where we were monitored whether we are studying all the time or not. So I would caution CCTVs in child play spaces or even in libraries, because children should be able to have fun and not feel like they're being surveilled, right? So I think there is a balance that has to be struck. Finally, I just wanted to add that the problem with respect to something like disability, gender, caste, poverty is that there is so much stigma that I don't think anybody should be forced to identify with a group to receive support. So I would just like to add that sensitization of the people involved is, I think, a number one priority, because even if you have accessible infrastructure, if the student doesn't feel safe or comfortable accessing it, then there is no point, right? Like, and in our work, we talked to some people who run community libraries in Delhi. So they said that it was a free library. They made it accessible infrastructure. Everything was there. But this the person who runs it talked about a student who was standing outside the library for 6 months without entering because he didn't feel like he could enter that. And that, I think, is very important, ensuring that children are made to feel safe and comfortable because there are adults in the room they can trust. So if this is something that can be, even if it doesn't come in the context of a checklist, if that kind of process can be emphasized as a thread that runs through how to approach the notion of inclusion, I think that would be really beneficial. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ankita from Safety Pin. Thank you, Professor. I think it was very wonderful. I mean, a lot of points have already been covered, so I would not really, kind of repeat those. But one point that I was also going to say is that few years back, we were also doing one research where we were looking at few government schools in South Delhi, and we found that a lot of time the students were not using any public transport. So they just walk, and sometimes they take multiple shifts, like boys go in the evening and girls go in the morning. So it's a makeshift kind of school. And so like I think it's already been mentioned, so a lot of time girls don't necessarily have the chance to go to school in in such area, in very these kind of areas. So it's important that while we look at buses, what kind of provisions are available in buses, but also the walking environment by itself should be, adequate and safe for a child or for their, even for their caregivers, to so that they can feel safe while they are walking. And so that's one part, because not everybody will come in a public transport, or I mean, I'm not even considering private transport here. So people use e-rickshaw. So it's important that those facilities are also available round the clock to be able to really ensure that more people, more students can access school. And then I think there should be one point, I'm sure in your framework and analysis, there is a provision where we speak to students, because, and even their parents for that matter, because all these facilities, are these things making any difference? Is there, eventually we want more kids to attend school. So is there a change in the number of people or number of kids who are coming to school? And I mean, that is something that I think should be, I'm sure it is the larger objective of the course, to ensure that everybody can come and access education.
Good afternoon, everybody. Uttam Gupta, Director UTPEC, from Planning Department DDA. I will just focus on the main points which have already been discussed, and just what suggested for the future, I think. So first of all, everybody is concentrating on the implementation, which is the major. As far as the education is concerned, knowledge is concerned, I think nowadays every civil engineer, every planner is being educated well from the colleges itself about the designs and parameters what are to be followed. The only thing is the implementation. The implementation is by engineers on site is done by the building plans only, which is a working drawings. And if it is not incorporated in the working drawings, it is a failure. There is no other chance to incorporate these or include these concepts in on site without inclusion in the building plans. So I suggest that if like DUSC, like other agencies are there, fire department is there of government of Delhi, why not we can create a special body for it, for the special approvals, and make it mandatory in the part of building plans approval. So if it is a mandatory part in the building plan approval, then the new building will never be failure from this point of view. As far as retrofitting is concerned, we can, sir, in the schools part, I can say that every year or every 3 years, I think, revalidation is done for registration. So for registration, if we make a revalidation of building plans compulsory, that will be useful. Because if revalidation is done, the approval of building plans can only take up, and after that only the registration will be given. Otherwise, it will not be given. So secondly is the grants. We can reduce the grants as per the points which are. So by reduction in the grants, it will be difficult for the schools also. So they will work at the best to receive the grants and do for the best for the people. So this is the first implementation what chief engineer sir has been taking up. So then the what I will say for the ministry part. So ministry brings up guidelines, various rules and regulations. But so unfortunately they are advisory for the people or engineers. They are never being notified, which are become mandatory after notification. So it should be notified. Not it should be released as a book or guidelines or what. Because otherwise it will never be mandatory, it is a advisory. Even the National Building Code today is an advisory book. Yeah. It is not mandatory. If you make it a mandatory, then it should be notified. Under some act is there, already provisions are there, you have to just notify it for the implementation. So then the other parts are also included, sir, like you can say funds and grants I have already said. Sir, then what he has said around surrounding areas of the schools. So guidelines are already there. UTPEC guidelines are also there. NBC guidelines are also there. Even the IRC codes are there for the schools area accessibility and other things. The only thing is the implementation again. We are taking from 2018, I think we have been taking care of the every project, road projects, and we have been including universal accessibility in those projects. The only thing is within the premises and just outside the premises. So it should be the implementation part, and implementation can be forced by what I was told you. Thank you.
Hi, I know a lot has already been spoken. First, to introduce myself, I identify myself as a sector ally. Won't get into specifics. So I think I just want to reiterate what all of you have already very, very nicely emphasized. This is a technical discussion. I know the module pertains to technical aspects, but we cannot have any kind of guidelines or discussions unless we see disability as a social construct. It has to be seen like that. All of the issues that we're talking about, the trainings and the accessibility challenges are going to be addressed to human beings. There's a human value chain. So if you take that as a basis, then the person with disability is a human being, and he or she is in a social construct. So I think that has to be the underlying principle, and that's where the solutions will also emerge in terms of constantly ratifying, building, reconstructing, and taking our learnings to different levels. And as you were pointing out, Sonia, right? Sneha, sorry, that the children themselves are the stakeholders. There's a lot of learnings that come from them. And sir, you also pointed out, Professor Chattopadhyay, that talking about maintenance angle, that also comes from a social aspect, let's say about hygiene inside the accessible toilet. If we understand this as a social issue, understand the hygiene levels of how different human beings see it and their I think their standards will also be different. So we'll have to kind of come to an agreement and fix those things. These are all human elements of the implementation of these guidelines and the trainings. Thank you.
Um, just wanted to add something. I think just listening to so many people here, one thing is, can we look at a community of practice? Like a lot of like people are doing so many different things or have insights. So maybe UN Habitat is a good partner to look at a community of practice model so that things don't need to be reinvented. And there are so many cross learnings that we can already see. Like for example, you in your diagram, site entry was this small bubble. Our whole world is that site entry, right? We're going in. So what if we added to what that bubble looks like, and in that sense. Second, what comes very clearly is to like seeing is believing. So creating models, even if they fail, and infrastructure models are expensive, but the government should commit to that sort of like implementation funds as experiments also, and then learn from that. Third is identifying champions, because if people hear people, so a government would hear a peer and get an encouragement, but a teacher might hear a teacher and get encouragement. A student might hear a student, because from our work, and as sir said, in terms of school zones, we are creating Delhi's first student street as we speak, and this is that model where children, families, government, everybody slowly had done it. So once it gets done, it is something for everybody to understand or learn and move beyond. Similarly, we're doing it with every 10 other schools in Delhi. So how does that, create like a community of practice, and how do we inform or from the learning so that somebody can pick it up and do that? And finally, I just wanted to highlight also from the stigma part, what we've heard in schools is some parents just don't want their their child to be seen as child with special need. So even if the teacher wants to provide everything that the government or the social justice system is wanting to provide, they just don't want to accept that their child has a learning disability or intellectual disability. And that kind of pushes all those good things that might have been done over the past 2 decades for this child to not be accessible. So how do we look at that is also something one could look at. So that it doesn't mean that you have a disability to gain learning support. So making it, so that's something that's the learning, because we work on urban spaces constantly. Is that the requirement that could be higher for some people, but ultimately the design is going to benefit everybody. So the focus then has to be, like somebody said, keep the more marginalized at the center, providing for it in a way that everybody in the school will benefit from this.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we had a lot of discussion, but I'll try to bring it back to the focus of today's meeting, and because some of these issues were also discussed in the previous workshop. So today, I would like to pose some questions to our star guest, engineers. So because it comes out again from this discussion कि implementation में काफी कुछ problem है. साहब तो IIT के graduate हैं. He is from IIT Delhi. You also said that there is no lack of learning or knowledge among architects, engineers, and things. But when we look at the chain, it comes down to contractor, to subcontractor, to specific trade contractor. तो कहीं तो problem है. So if I am permitted, may I ask engineers Saab that what are the practical bottlenecks? Let's come to the brass tacks. Let's find out the bottleneck. And there can be several. So if you could just say, these are the 5 major bottlenecks as per your understanding.
Thank you giving me opportunity. I would like to summarize where we are right now and where we are going. Right now, we are not even able to match the basic level of compliances. We are talking at higher levels and reaching to inclusive one and all. 48% are falling in the blindness category, which is the government feels if we address, we will be able to catch the low-hanging fruits. That is the concept. And we all know how the political wills and political or funding works. Unless it gives dividends for the political process, no one is going to fund that the entire process. Corporate works for value addition or profits. So these are the prime movers which really deter the funding of any of the projects, because the pressure group is not there, the political, the capital is not available. So in this, how people are supposed to move? As far as what Sir had, this from this Ministry of Delhi had argued that the lack of knowledge or lack of implementation part is there. We hire some of the best architects in the field for designing. They also don't give that much cost or time devotion to that part of it, because it's not paying dividend. No one is bothered about. We can very easily get away with it. Like we hire fire consultants, we hire medical consultants. We can always hire disabled consultants. That is not an issue. It is not a very good, but because that pressure group is lacking, even within the disability part, there is a blind association, there is a deaf association, there is autism, everyone is vying for space. So it is very difficult for the government to apportion, like what is said in the country, that the private profit with public loss. This cannot go on. So private sector also has to come forward to fill this gap, because there is a large gap where this profit, the corporate sector is cornering all those things and leaving all these social activities only to the government. So it is very difficult for the government to carry forward with the existing infrastructure. The inefficiency with the systems goes, the procurement method where L1 is the only criteria. These all pose their different challenges. We have to navigate in these challenges, and definitely we are saying that not all is bad. We have traveled a lot and we'll definitely travel much farther from where we are. So we feel ki nothing is lost. If we ask for one on all, that is very difficult to achieve, because the costs are very exponentially high. So at least we try to implement that easily implementable part, so that maximum numbers are covered, and then only move beyond that, because asking for that will be too much for the country, which is starved with funds, starved with the basic infrastructure for the people to work, lack of capital, lack of even the GDP level is very low. Low income groups are very low. Social factors also prevent people from going to school. So these are the real implementation part, in which I think the non-NGOs can play a big role, because the disabled, as they don't form a sufficient pressure group, so there will be very less takers unless the NGOs put forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I may see if I understood it correctly, what you have said is that people are looking for low-hanging fruits, and blind or partial visibility problems is one of the priority areas, and so that is one. That's the prioritization issue. Second, you said funding definitely is a problem. You're talking about cost to time issues, and it is considered as is not paying enough dividend. Therefore, you don't think that you should appoint or a consultant for this, but if the priorities change and if it is looked upon economically viable and paying dividend enough, then there is no problem at all. And very correctly, very nicely, I will quote it other places also, private profit with public loss can't go on. We talk about, social aspect as if it's the mandate of the government only. That's not how it should be. However, let me again reiterate that, do you think that there is any lack of technical knowledge? You don't.
No, there is no lack of technical knowledge. The match between cost and the technology available is only there. If it comes very low, it is easier to implement.
Right.
And what Sir had said regarding the railway platform, we can always crowdsource. Someone can come forward with applications which can crowdsource and correct this and put forward as a pressure group. Like what we heard, that railway minister, when someone tweeted him that children milk is not there, he was able to provide. So these type of things can definitely come up and definitely improve in the existing facilities.
Right. Thank you. Please.
Sorry to play the devil's advocate here, but now again I'm trying to, I agree that the training is there. So now what is the challenge, like you're saying, it getting translated into a building plan, that is handed over to a contractor for implementation. So what is that gap now? There is training, there's technical knowledge not getting translated on paper.
Yeah, so technical knowledge, I have already told the technical knowledge, by technical knowledge, it has already been included in the building plans. It is up to the working drawings, which if there is no, you can say there are space constraints, there are fund constraints, there are various other constraints. So they may not be included in the building plans. The provision may not be included in the building plans, working drawings. So it will not be implemented on ground. That's why the practical. If it is become a mandatory, although it can be implemented after some time, but it should be included in the building plan. Building plan completion period is there. You can suggest completion period of 2 years if you required. As the fund generation, the construction can be taken up. But it should be included in the building plan. That's what I want to say. Otherwise, if it is not included in the building plan, it will not. Even the audit is not can be not legalized. Okay. Because audit is also legalized based on some documents which you have approved, and the building plan is the only document which is approved for the site.
Thank you very much. My second question to Srivastav ji, you've seen our presentation, and I'll just ask you how you felt about it. What did you think about the technical content?
No, definitely the technical content was very good. This is definitely a way forward.
Okay, presentation format.
Presentation also is very good. But again, I would like to say the implementation part, and you start auditing, half the school will have to be closed. So, so that is another problem. No, see, right now what we are talking about is when the MCD building that is very nearby itself has not doesn't have a completion certificate. 80% of the hospitals were not having fire clearance prior to COVID. So we are working in this sort of environment. If we expect too much, we are expecting too much, I think. So compliance is to the level. Incremental we can definitely do. We'll start with low hanging fruit so that we are incremental way, we are reaching to the ultimate objective.
In fact, that reminds me when I was working for water supply sanitation some time back, with a Swedish university, I found a very famous UN quote which says that there are countries which have got 20 LPCD consumption, and the standards say 110 LPCD. So the quote of the United Nations was, do we look for all water for some or some water for all? Because if you look for 110 LPCD for all, you will reach nowhere. So what should be our approach? Like he said, maybe this brings to a step by step which way we should go. But I think the amount of dynamism and amount of interest that this is generating, thanks to Parul, this is a very, very vital achievement. I would understand.
The low hanging fruit bit is right. We start somewhere rather than not addressing it anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So the problem here is we also talk about the political dividends,
Yeah.
right? The problem is that once we achieve certain numbers, we get busy with advertising those numbers and we forget about the other fruits, which are not so low hanging.
Because that is also but that is also essential part of the ecosystem. Unless the green building movement only gained the traction because of the advertisement it was able to bring. So that is also, we cannot ignore that part, the advertising and the dividends it's bring to the private sector, then only someone will come. The political dividends in terms of value addition only will reap the benefits. Otherwise, it's very difficult to push through for funding to acceptance and to adoption. So that is another part.
I think if I can add to what Mr. Srivastav said, there are 4 steps that we see: reasonable accommodation, visitable, barrier-free, and inclusive. So I think we can move step by step and make our build and retrofitting attempts to make our buildings, inclusive, following the steps. Yeah, maybe the reasonable accommodation is the minimum intervention that we do for compliance of certain non-negotiable components. Then we make the building visitable, like those parts which are accessible by the public, those parts are absolutely visitable, but not the entire building. Then we make the building barrier free, that is the entire building is compliant to the barrier free standards which are set by the harmonized guidelines and others. Then final and the fourth is inclusive in all sense, that which takes care of the all sorts of disabilities, and entire facility services are accessible. Definitely that's our target, as he already mentioned. But let us move step by step and take technical steps towards that.
I think we have somebody else who would like to.
Yeah, hi everybody. So I've been listening to this engaging discussion virtually and now from here. So I would like to add a few points that there has been discussion around that the private sector also has to take up the accessibility compliances. So for that, as Sir said, that there has to be notification apart from the advisory documents and books that we have. So I feel that through sensitization, this cannot be done, as this is not just an issue of India, it is with many countries, and this is only possible once we have larger legal penalties. So that is the only way out where we can have implementation in the private sectors, and it cannot be done through sensitization. We have to do sensitization. It is a slower process. That is what I feel that, but there has to be large penalties. And so what happens is so I am from a community of lived experiences. I have muscular dystrophy and I'm also an architect. So what I hear from people is that, so now we have Sugamya Bharat app as well. So people do raise the complaints and everything, but again, only just complaining is not the solution. So what I feel is, even in that portal, there can be there can be a provision of service where, though it really helps, like because the mails go and it's a legal mail that goes to the owner or the concerned authority, but there can be some ways where we can provide solutions instead of just complaining. So there can be one more stakeholder in between who can just simply write to the problem that this can be the direct solution, so that it goes in a way that there can be experts who can guide on that, and there can be a way that the owner understands that there can be this solution to the problem. Then again, I want to add that what happens is then the private sector people, what they say is that we don't have any children with disabilities, so why do we make the infrastructure accessible? So we need to make, definitely that I said that there has to be the mandate and legal penalties, but again we need to have awareness and sensitization around the point that inclusion and accessibility is a multi-sectoral approach, right? It is an entire ecosystem that has to work around it. So like, I think there were discussions around that children are not able to come to the school because transport is again an issue. Accessible transport is again an issue. So all these things have to be in the same place. So we cannot say that we won't make schools accessible until and unless we have the transport system accessible. We cannot say that. We are moving in slow step process, and it is really important to have each part of the ecosystem function in a way that at the end people come out of their houses, children with disabilities come out of their houses, they do their education, they have employment opportunities. So there has to be awareness around that, this cannot be an excuse that we don't have children with disabilities as being enrolled in the schools. So this was the point, and also I would like to differ from one of the point that was raised, that there is no lack of technical knowledge and expertise. What I personally have experienced is that till now there is no mandatory curriculum in architecture which says that about accessibility or inclusion. It is just as like it is only electives that are there in colleges, and even if we say that only 2% of institutions that might take care of the agenda of accessibility and inclusion. So how can we say that there is no lack of technical expertise? But I really appreciate that there has been greater steps and we are moving forward. And again, I remember in last week only, I met Mr. Rajesh Agarwal from Department of Persons with Disabilities, and he said that we have now like requested for a mandate accessibility inclusion with, they have signed MOU with Council of Architecture, and I feel that's a great step. So we're looking forward to that. But at present, there is a huge lack of technical expertise. And also, yeah, so these were the major points I wanted to highlight.
Thank you so much for this discussion. I think this is a very, very important discussion, and public-private partnerships and who's the right authority has always been a question. I think someone here mentioned about the building code, also about the certification that educational institutions get. So not even retrofitting for the new upcoming educational institutions. Why do we have that certification when just, if you make the building code mandated? So what the government can really do is take these larger steps which can bring change around mandating the building code, around having mandatory accessibility systems and systems as well as infrastructure in place for educational institutions to get those approvals, and that already solves a lot of new upcoming institutions issues that we would talk about, and inclusive education. I also feel it's very important, disability groups are large numbers and they have, I would beg to differ on that, that there are a lot of pressure groups and there's a lot of work that has been done. The idea is that, and I've mentioned this in many forums, that we're also asked to go to different ministries, right? So if we go to certain ministries, and this is very, very publicly known between education and women and children and Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment and urban planning, you're basically stuck between multiple ministries because you're then sent back to the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment saying, but they are the nodal department. The department says we're a nodal department, we're not an enforcement department, you need to go back. We faced this in the time of COVID as well with the research report. We had evidence, we wanted to get some support around safety and violence that women and girls with disabilities were facing, around digital accessibility of education. Special schools still fall under the purview of Ministry of Social Justice, while others don't. So we're looking at a lot of discrepancy around that. And so I think governments can play a larger role. Yes, the funds can be brought in by and must be brought in by also the private sector. But I think just wanted to make these few, I want to thank the panel and everyone again for bringing very important discussions and creating this space for thinking through and implementation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nidhi. And apologies, in the interest of time, we'll have to cut this really interesting discussion and debate short. I also see some comments from Dr. Anjali Agarwal on the chat, and we'll document these and be sharing with all of you as we take this dialogue forward. One thing I would like to again put forth at the table here is this discussion of low-hanging fruits. We don't talk about that when we talk about the rest of the stakeholder groups. So why introduce this for when we are discussing persons with disability, and to make a politically incorrect statement? We are not talking about low-hanging fruit and financial challenges for the G20 celebrations. The pockets have opened up. So the takeaway from me and from a very inspiring conversation here is that who are the champions, and rightly beginning from the youth, the children that we learn from are implementing in these first pilot exercises, that they are certainly the champions. We have learned this not just in this theme, but across different sectors, that you teach children about environment, about so many other areas, and that's where the change begins. But then all of us in our personal capacities, why can't we champion for this? Why can't we negotiate infrastructure costs to have disability, led infrastructure at the best quality into the budgets? I'm just posing it just to challenge. I'm sure it's not easy, but then that's from my experience as an urban planner, that's what our job is, that we negotiate for, in the interest of leaving no one behind, the farthest person, and see how far that takes us. But that's that's something that we need to really aspire for, that no low hanging fruits, but really the best for the people who are not able to access into the economic growth story and the social growth story of our country. So I'll leave that, and Mr. Srivastava, if you would like to also add some remarks.
I just want to conclude by saying that we have to be hopeful, positive. A lot has been done, lot will be done. This is continuous work in progress, and we all hope someday will come that these things are a norm rather than an exceptions, which right now things are. With that, I'd like to thank you for being a patient listener and listening to me. Thank you.
अभी बहुत मैं तो एक ही बात मानता हूं खाली कि जो इंक्लूजन है वो अपनी इन्फेंसी में है, राइट? एज डायरेक्टरेट ऑफ एजुकेशन आई टेल कि वी वर हैविंग इन 2013 only 6 teachers. Today we are having 2000 teachers, special education teachers. So we are working, but miles to go ahead. अभी ये इन्फेंसी में बहुत सारी चीजें 2016 का बहुत सारे सेक्शंस बन गए, तो वो जो चीजें हैं प्रोफेसर धरेल साहब के साथ स्टेट कमिश्नर के साथ जो मीटिंग होती थी वो सेंसिटाइजेशन ऊपर के लेवल पे, खाली अब वॉशरूम बनना है किसी स्कूल में, तो मुझे नहीं समझ आ रहा कि जो वॉशरूम बनना है अगर वो एक्सेसिबल बनना है तो उसमें कितना फर्क आएगा? बिल्डिंग बन रही है, शटर लग रहा है, रोप बन रहा है, मतलब दिस आई डोंट थिंक कि इसमें पैसे वाली चीज, अब जो नई बिल्डिंग बन रही है खाली एटलीस्ट उन्होंने कहा मुकेश जी आपने नई बिल्डिंग स्कूल की बना दी, मैंने अपनी टीम भेजी, पीडब्ल्यूडी वालों ने उसे भी एक्सेसिबल नहीं बनाया। तो उसमें चीज ये है खाली कि उसको बहुत, जो उत्तम गुप्ता जी ने बात कही ना कि वो नोटिफिकेशन में हो कि कंप्लीशन सर्टिफिकेट जब ही मिलेगा जब वो पूरा टोटलिटी में पूरा होगा कंप्लीट। तो उसमें जो नई बिल्डिंग्स है उसमें बजट का मुझे बहुत ज्यादा कोई कंस्ट्रेन उसमें नहीं लगता। तो इसमें थोड़ा सा हमारा बस खाली एक ये है कि अभी बीच में कोविड आ गया तो हाय तोबा एक साथ मस्ती है, जब गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया से कोई नोटिफिकेशन कोई सर्कुलर आ जाता है तो शो कॉजेज पूरी दिल्ली में शो हो गए, ये हो गया वो हो गया, फिर वो बड़े सारे चीजें एक दूसरे पासिंग बक ऑन अदर्स, तो बड़ी सारी चीजें। लेकिन हाँ ये है कि ये एक जो एक टेक्निकल जो कमिटमेंट हमारा है वो किया जा सकता है, तो उस पर लगे हुए हैं और ये बहुत अच्छा प्रयास है। और इन्फेंसी में मैं कह रहा हूँ कि अभी ये माना जाता है कि स्पेशल एजुकेशन टीचर ही इस बच्चे को देखेगा, जबकि हमारे एजुकेशन सिस्टम में जैसे मैडम ने बात कही आर्किटेक्ट वगैरह के सिलेबस में, ऐसे ही मैं टीचर्स की बात कर रहा हूँ। सपोज मैं फिजिक्स टीचर हूँ, मैं अपना लेसन प्लान क्लास में डिलीवर कर रहा हूँ, तो मेरे दिमाग में वो सेंसिटाइजेशन नहीं है कि 21 बेंचमार्क डिसेबिलिटीज के हिसाब से मेरे कंटेंट की जो एक्सेसिबिलिटी है वो होनी चाहिए। तो वो बीएड की ट्रेनिंग में वो चीज इनकॉर्पोरेट होगी ना, तो वो अभी सब चीजें वी आर वर्किंग ऑन दैट, काम चल रहा है, बहुत काम हो रहा है उस पर, वी आर ट्राइंग टू पुट इट। सो दैट वे इट्स रियली एन अप्रिशिएबल एफर्ट ऑफ यूएन हैबिटेट सर का, ये टीम जो है, क्योंकि हम 2-3 बार मिले हैं, तो मैं तो क्योंकि बहुत ज्यादा कई बार दर्द होता है, तकलीफ होती है, तो वो जो एक चीज है वो जब तक वो आमिर खान वाली टैगलाइन है कि जब तक दिल पे नहीं लगेगा तब तक बात नहीं बनेगी, तो दिल पे लगेगा तो रास्ता निकलेगा कोई ना कोई। और बहुत सारी चीजें हमने देखी हैं ऊपर से नीचे तक, हमारे ऑफिसर्स, सीनियर ऑफिसर्स, रात को 12-12 बजे भी मैं कल बता रहा था इस बात को कि सब फाइलें अगले दिन हो जाएंगी, लेकिन अगर इन बच्चों से रिलेटेड कोई फाइल होती है, एलजी साहब से पोस्ट क्रिएट करवा के अप्रूव करवाना और ये करना, हमें याद है कि 7 साल में हम लोगों ने बहुत भाग दौड़ करी है, रिसोर्स सेंटर्स बने हैं। और एक बार हमने अपने डिप्टी सीएम सर को बुलाया तो बोले यार कमाल है, मैक्स में जो फैसिलिटी 2000 रुपए पर डे में एक पेरेंट को मिलती है, हम लोगों के रिसोर्स सेंटर में वो फ्री है, वी आर हायरिंग एक्सपर्ट्स। तो चीजें हम कर रहे हैं, कोशिश उसमें चल रही है, लेकिन अभी इसमें माइल्स टू गो अहेड। तो ये प्रयास जो है वो एक कमिटमेंट के साथ, टाइम कंस्ट्रेंट के साथ जब हम लोग करेंगे तो डेफिनेटली इसमें चीजें निकल के आएंगी। थैंक यू।
Really inspiring words from an educator, so this is why I'm happy to be surrounded by professors and teachers here. But we have Mr. Rahul Agarwal, Director, Department of Social Welfare from Delhi, and he's been championing this with us from day one. So Mr. Agarwal, before we close here.
First of all, my apologies for being late. I actually had a meeting, so I just finished with the meeting and came here. I think this program was very important, and the conceptualization and execution was done with the goal that children are the future, and basically, until unless you tell them what are their rights and what exactly they should demand, basically now accessibility is a right. So until unless they are aware about their rights, they cannot demand it. And similarly, the teachers, etc. I think one student can make. I mean, the sensitization program is so important because once a child goes home, basically he tells his parents that I learned this thing, and so ultimately, to make the society aware about and make them sensitized about this issue, it's very important that we start with the schools. So the pilot training program that we did was very successful. It was done in just two, three schools, but I think we're looking forward to have them in all the schools in Delhi. So that I think that's a very good beginning to start with. And then obviously the inclusive education branch of Director of Education is doing a tremendous job in this field. So let's hope that we'll continue it forward and do something meaningful and something good in coming years. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I think we bring the session to a close. I would really like to thank all our government partners, Mr. Srivastava, Mr. Bahadur, and Mr. Agarwal. And special thanks to Professor Banerjee and Professor Chattopadhyay and Umesh, who have poured in so many long hours to help us in conceptualizing and designing this exercise. And to all of you, because your feedback even during the first stakeholder meetings has led us, given us a lot of feedback to continue to refine those modules, and we seek the similar guidance this time around. So thank you so much, and please join us for lunch. Thanks. Virtual participants, Doctor. I'm sorry we are not able to share the amazing aroma, that's here. But thank you so much for your feedback, and we hope we can see you in person, yes, at some event in the future. And thank you so much.
Yeah.